You think you know what justice is? Forget it. In this city, justice smells of blood and mold, and its face is not an angel with scales, but a weary person in a musty robe, looking indifferently into the eyes of those he sentences to pain, hunger, or death. Here, the judge is not a hero, not a sage, not a savior. He is the go between for law and suffering, an eternal prisoner of his own craft, a loner doomed to choose each day who to throw to the crowd and who to the system. But before you settle in, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is there. I'm really curious to see who's joined us. Now, get comfortable. We're about to begin. You wake up in the dim, dank room, the chill of the stone walls creeping into your bones even as the first light of dawn struggles through a tiny crack in the shuttered window. The room is silent, save for the occasional drip of water from the leaking roof, echoing in the stillness like a clock marking the passage of time that never truly matters here. The smell of mildew and rot is omnipresent, a scent that seems to cling to everything in this world. There is no comfort in this space, no warmth or softness, only the rough straw of your bed and the cold stone beneath it. You stretch, though there's little satisfaction in it. Your body aches from the hard sleep you've had, chumps, and your mind is already weary with the knowledge that today will be just another day in this dark, oppressive world. You are a judge, though your title seems so hollow when you consider the reality of your existence. It is not a title of respect or honor, but a burden, a chain that ties you to a never ending cycle of suffering and judgment. You have no say in the world that surrounds you. The people of your city, those you have sworn to serve, are no better off than the rats that scurry through the filth streaked streets. The stench of decay permeates everything, from the food they eat to the very air they breathe. They live in hovels, shackled by poverty and despair, working themselves to the bone for a meager existence. And you stand in judgment over them, but you are no better. Your chamber is no palace, no grand hall of justice. It is simply another stone structure in this grim world, a place where the condemned come to meet their fates. The world outside your chamber is not much better, though you rarely venture beyond these walls. You have no reason to. The streets are filthy, clogged with refuse, human waste, and the occasional dead body left to rot in plain sight as a grim reminder of the fragility of life here. The roads are no better, muddy and treacherous, often impossible to navigate unless you have the strength or the luck to avoid the puddles of muck that seem to swallow everything in their path. The people walk with their heads down, too ashamed or too afraid to look up, for fear of attracting attention from the guards or the priests who seem to watch every corner. But you're different. You wear your judge's robes with a grim sense of duty, knowing full well that they offer no protection from the realities of your world. You might be able to sentence someone to death, to send them to the gallows or the stake, but you know that it is not justice that you dispense. It is power. power that is as fleeting and fragile as the lives of the people you rule over. And you too are a prisoner to that power. For what else is a judge if not a puppet in the hands of the system? Your morning routine is simple as it has always been. You rise from your bed, shuffle to the small basin of water that is your only source of cleanliness, and wash your face. The water is cold and murky, no better than the streams that run through the city's gutters, but it is all you have. You do not dare to complain about it. There is no one who would listen anyway. Your face stares back at you in the water, pale and gaunt, the reflection of someone who has long since stopped living for anything but the work that is demanded of him. The court will open soon, and with it, the familiar routine. You will sit at the head of the room, the heavy wooden bench creaking beneath your weight as you look down upon the people who will be brought before you. They will shuffle in, one by one, their faces downcast in fear, their hands trembling with the anticipation of whatever fate awaits them. You will hear their pleas, their cries for mercy, but you know they will not sway you. The law is the law, and your role is to enforce it, no matter how unjust, no matter how cruel. Outside your chamber, the noise of the city slowly rises. The clang of metal, the shouts of traders peddling their goods, the cries of children playing in the streets, all of it is distant, a muffled cacophony that serves only to remind you of the world beyond these walls. But for now, your world is confined to this chamber, this seat of judgment. The people will come, and you will pass sentence. You have no other choice. It is what you were born to do. As you don your robe, you try not to think of the faces of those who have come before you. The young girl who was accused of witchcraft and burned at the stake, her screams still haunting your dreams. The man who stole a loaf of bread to feed his starving family, his execution an act of law, not mercy. The woman who killed her husband in a moment of rage, her execution no less final for the fact that she had once been a loving wife. Each of them is a shadow in your mind, a reminder of the cruelty that pervades every aspect of this world. And you are no different from them, merely another piece in the great grinding machine that is medieval society. You are not a hero, not a savior. You are a cog in the wheel of an unjust world, and the only thing you can do is keep turning. You move through your quarters with the same heavy tread you have practiced every morning for as long as you care to remember. There is no rush in your actions, for time here means little, and your tasks never change. As you step across the rough stone floor, you are reminded once again how little separates you from the prisoners who shuffle through these corridors on their way to judgment. The walls are thick and cold, their moisture seeping into everything, growing slimy green patches that even the most diligent servants cannot scrape away. You wrinkle your nose at the familiar stench, a mixture of old sweat, mildew, spoiled food, and the lingering tang of blood that no amount of scrubbing will ever remove. No candles are lit at this hour. Oil is precious, and besides, your eyes have long since adjusted to the semi-darkness. You pull your robe around yourself, though it offers little comfort. Its coarse wool itches against your skin, but it is still a mark of your office, however hollow that might be. You know what this day holds. Every day is the same. There are no holidays for justice, only an endless procession of souls awaiting their fate. You take your seat at the small table by the door, breaking your fast on a hunk of black bread so hard you nearly break a tooth. There is no butter, no cheese. Those are reserved for someone of greater importance. You force the bread down with a swallow of sour wine, grimacing at the taste. A faint light finally creeps across the floor as the sun rises somewhere behind thick clouds. You can hear the distant noises of the city beginning to stir, the bray of a donkey, the rattle of a cart, a woman's shriek as she discovers a rat in her larder. In the hallway, the sound of boots scraping stone signals the approach of your clerk. He is a thin, sallow man with watery eyes and the nervous habits of a cornered animal. You have little affection for him, but he is competent, and in this world, that is a rare and valuable trait. He bows low and hands you the list of cases for the day. You do not bother to thank him. Such courtesies are for another life. As you scan the list, you recognize the names. Most are regulars, the drunk who cannot keep his hands from other men's purses, the washerwoman accused of stealing a bolt of cloth, the baker's apprentice suspected of cheating the scales. Their stories are all the same, variations on a single grim melody. Guilt or innocence rarely matters. The law is clear, and your job is not to question, but to enforce. Your stomach churns as you read the final name, a new one, unfamiliar. A child, no older than 12, accused of setting fire to a neighbor's shed. You sigh. There is never any respite. You gather your papers and move to the main chamber. The courtroom is as unwelcoming as the rest of the building. High, narrow windows that let in little light. Thick wooden benches worn smooth by generations of desperate hands. A dais where you sit in judgment. The smell here is worse. A pungent mix of unwashed bodies, old straw, and despair. The guards, clad in battered leather and rusting mail, herd the accused into the room, prodding them with their halberds if they move too slowly. The crowd that gathers is silent, their faces a sea of blank resignation. Some come out of morbid curiosity, others because they have nowhere else to be. For many, this is the closest they will come to justice, the spectacle of another's misery to distract from their own. You take your place on the dais, the chair creaking ominously under your weight. The clerk stands at your side, ready to record the proceedings. The first case is called, and the ritual begins. The accused is a man of perhaps 40 years, though it is hard to tell. Life here ages people quickly. His hands are rough, his face scarred by a lifetime of hard labor. He stands with his head bowed, eyes fixed on the ground. The charge, stealing 2 chickens from a neighbor's coop. The neighbor testifies, her voice trembling with righteous anger. The accused mumbles an excuse. He was hungry. His children were starving. It makes no difference. The law is the law. The penalty, a flogging, 10 lashes, and the return of the chickens, if they can be found alive. You watch as the sentence is carried out, the man's back laid bare, the whip cracking through the stale air. The crowd watches in silence, no pity in their eyes. When it is over, the man is dragged away, bloodied but alive. You feel nothing. You cannot afford to. The cases proceed in grim succession. The washerwoman is next. She is accused of theft, denies it, but her word carries no weight against that of the merchant. You sentence her to a day in the stocks, where the townsfolk will have their fun. The baker's apprentice is found guilty of cheating his customers, 3 days in the pillory, and a fine his family cannot hope to pay. The sentences blur together, indistinguishable in their cruelty. Each time you raise your hand, you feel the weight of your office pressing down on you, but you do not falter. This is your duty. This is the world. The final case comes, and the boy is brought forward. He is small, thin, eyes wide with terror. He cannot stop shaking. The charge is arson, a serious crime. The owner of the shed, a burly farmer with hands like spades, accuses him without hesitation. The boy stammers his defense. He was only playing. He did not mean to cause harm. The crowd murmurs, some with sympathy, most with scorn. You know the law. Arson is punishable by branding, sometimes by death. You hesitate just for a moment, but the clerk's eyes are on you, and so are those of the crowd. You pass the sentence. The boy collapses, sobbing. The guards drag him away. There is no applause, no satisfaction, only the relentless grind of the machine, and you at its center, turning the wheel. As the cases end and the courtroom empties, you are left alone with your thoughts. Another day begins in this grim place, another day in the endless procession. There is no end, no hope, only the knowledge that tomorrow will bring more of the same. You sit in silence, listening to the drip of water in the dark, and you wonder, not for the first time, if justice ever truly existed here. You eventually rise from your creaking chair, bones popping in protest, and make your way to the tiny window set high in the thick wall. You peer out, not because you expect to see anything new, but because it is a habit, a ritual as empty and necessary as any other in your life. The world outside is neither beautiful nor kind, and yet it holds a sort of power over you, a reminder that your misery is not unique. It is shared, universal, ground into the cobbles, and stitched into the rags of every man, woman, and child who shuffles through the winding streets. The city is alive, in the same sense that a wound is alive, festering, pulsing, never allowed to heal. In the early morning, mist coils low along the alleyways, clinging to the sides of houses that lean against one another for support, as if too tired to stand alone. The roofs sag, patched with whatever refuse the inhabitants could scavenge, and smoke dribbles from crooked chimneys, staining the sky a permanent shade of gray. The houses themselves are nothing more than glorified hovels, crowded together so closely that sunlight is a rumor and fresh air a fantasy. You watch the people move below. They trudge through mud and filth, heads bent, their lives measured in aches and disappointments. A woman with a basket slaps at a dog that snaps at her heels, and a child tugs at her skirts, whining for bread she does not have. An old man huddles in a doorway, coughing into his hands. His neighbors step over him as though he is just another piece of refuse. Farther along, two boys scuffle in the muck, fists flying, until a third joins in, and the fight ends as quickly as it began. No one wins, but no one loses anything worth keeping. You recognize many of these faces, though you have never learned their names. Some have stood before you in judgment, eyes wide with hope or narrowed in defiance. Others you know only by reputation, a thief, a whore, a baker's widow clinging to the last shreds of dignity. There is no romance in their suffering, no heroic struggle, only the constant, grinding pressure of existence. The city itself seems to conspire against them, its very stones slick with malice. The air is thick with the stink of humanity. The gutters overflow with rainwater, and worse, winding their way toward the market square, where vendors hawk their meager wares beneath threadbare awnings. Here, everything is for sale, from bruised apples to secrets whispered over a mug of sour ale. The cries of the merchants rise in a dissonant chorus. Fresh fish, fresh eggs, though you suspect neither has been fresh for days. You know the truth, the fish is more bone than flesh, and the eggs are likely half formed, plucked from beneath starving hens. Everywhere there is a sense of urgency, of desperation. The baker's wife haggles for a better price, her voice raw with need. A butcher sharpens his cleaver, glaring at a boy who eyes a stringy rabbit with longing. The priests drift through the crowd in their dark robes, murmuring blessings that sound suspiciously like threats. No one meets your gaze, though you know some sense your presence behind the glass. They avoid the eyes of authority, not out of respect, but out of fear. No one wants to attract attention, not here, where a wrong word or a poorly timed glance can mean a night in the stocks or worse. You remember a time long ago when you believed yourself better than all this, when your robes were new, your judgments swift, your conscience clean. That illusion has long since faded. Now you know you are not above this world, but part of it, bound to it by the same invisible chains. Your authority is a fragile thing, easily broken, constantly questioned. The city will outlast you. Its filth and misery will persist long after your bones are dust. At the edge of the square, the gallows stand as a silent warning, their wood dark with age and use. A group of children tosses stones at the base, giggling, while a mother drags her daughter away, hissing warnings about the fate that awaits the wicked. You wonder if the girl listens, if any of them do. They grow up fast here, learning early that mercy is rare and luck is unreliable. You have seen children sentenced as adults, their tiny hands bound in rough rope, their cries drowned by the jeers of the crowd. The market square is also where justice is most visible, and by justice you mean spectacle. The stocks are never empty, the pillory always in use. Punishments are public, deliberately so. It is not enough for a thief to suffer. He must suffer in full view of his neighbors. The city demands blood, demands pain, and you are its instrument. It is a cycle as old as the stones beneath your feet. You carry it out, and then you carry it home with you, in your bones, in your dreams. As the morning drags on, the fog burns away, replaced by the acrid smoke from countless fires. The sun, if it can be called that, is a pale disk smothered by clouds. You withdraw from the window, leaving the city to its suffering. You have your own duties to attend to, after all, and the world beyond your walls is not likely to improve without you. Not that it ever improves at all. You close the shutter with a sigh, already weary, already longing for the oblivion of sleep. But sleep brings no peace here, only more shadows, more memories. There is no escape, not for you, not for anyone. In this city, every day is the same, and every day is a reminder that hope is a lie. You are the judge, yes, but the city is your sentence. You do not remember a time when you wanted to become a judge. The memory, if it ever existed, has been buried under years of obligation and the relentless, grinding expectations of your station. You suspect that no one truly aspires to this role. It is not a position one dreams of as a child. It is a burden bestowed, passed down from one unwilling participant to the next, like a shackle clamped around the ankle at birth. You are not a ruler nor a leader. You are merely a component of the system, a cog in a machine far older and more brutal than any single human life. Still, for all the grand titles and hollow honors, you know the truth. The system you serve is neither wise nor merciful. It is a behemoth, ravenous and indifferent, sustained by the suffering of those trapped in its maw. The laws are not carved from reason or compassion, but from habit, from fear, and from the desires of men far removed from mud, hunger, and pain. Most of those men will never stand in your courtroom, never smell the rot that festers in the corners, never witness the breaking of a body beneath the whip. They write decrees from their gilded chambers, secure in the knowledge that you and others like you will carry out their will with all the efficiency of a scythe at harvest. And so you do, day after day, year after year. Sometimes you wonder if you are merely another form of punishment, inflicted on the people as surely as the gallows or the rack. Your every judgment is a wound, your every sentence a scar, and still the world demands more. There are moments when you sense, almost superstitiously, that the city itself is watching you, waiting for the next act in the interminable play. The stones remember every crime, every scream, every broken promise. You are the one who ensures that the memories do not fade. Your place in the hierarchy is clear. You are not at the top. You have no say in what is right or wrong. Instead, you are the blade, sharpened and wielded by unseen hands. The bailiffs obey you in public, but their eyes are cold and calculating, their allegiance only as deep as your power to harm or protect them. The clerks whisper in corners, their words carrying to ears that matter more than your own. The guards, too, are loyal only to their coin. You command them, but you do not trust them. No one in your position ever does. You think sometimes of the men who sit above you, the magistrates, the lords, the bishops. They speak of justice as if it were a coin to be traded, a commodity to be weighed and measured. Their laws are precise, their punishments imaginative. Their sense of order is ironclad, but their hands are clean. They are rarely seen in your part of the city. When they do visit, it is as if they have crossed into some forbidden territory, noses wrinkled, eyes darting from shadow to shadow. They stay only as long as duty demands, then vanish back into their sanctuaries of wealth and security. It is left to you to translate their will into suffering, to make real the words scrawled in ink and sealed with wax. You know how quickly favor can turn to suspicion, how easily a judge can fall from grace. One wrong decision, one ill timed moment of mercy, and you might find yourself before the same tribunal you once served, begging for leniency that will not be granted. The memory of your predecessor's fate lingers. A man who thought himself secure, who dared to question a noble's verdict. He disappeared one morning, his name stricken from the rolls, his house claimed by the crown. No one speaks of him now, except in whispers after dark. You have learned to be careful, to keep your thoughts hidden behind a mask of indifference. You follow the law even when it disgusts you. You mete out punishment even when it sickens you. You have become an expert in silence, a master of neutrality. If you feel any pity for the wretches who pass through your court, you bury it deep where no one can see. Sympathy is a luxury you cannot afford, not when eyes are always watching, waiting for you to falter. Power, such as it is a fragile thing here. You wield it like a man forced to use a weapon that might at any moment turn in his hand. There is no safety, no comfort, only the knowledge that your position depends on your willingness to serve. The city needs order, the lords need obedience, the people need someone to blame. It is not uncommon for someone to spit at your feet as you walk the streets, a small act of rebellion, gone in an instant. Children throw stones at your shadow, scurry away before you can even turn your head. Shopkeepers offer you goods with forced smiles, bowing low as if in deference, but their eyes remain hard and hollow. You are not loved, you are not respected, you are feared, and only just enough to keep you from becoming a target. Sometimes you wonder what would happen if you simply stopped. If you refused to pronounce sentence, if you declared the law unjust and walked away from your bench. But you know the answer. There are always more judges, more cogs to replace the broken ones. The city would swallow your absence with barely a ripple, and the machine would grind on, unperturbed. You have seen what happens to those who break faith with the system. They vanish, Or worse, they return in pieces, reminders to those who remain. The laws you enforce are weapons as much as they are rules, wielded not only against the poor, but against anyone who dares to question their origin. You once believed in your earliest days that you could change things, that you could temper justice with mercy, that you could be wise where others were cruel. Now you are older and you know better. Mercy is for those with power. Wisdom is a curse, a weight around your neck. Here, in this city, only the machine endures. You are merely its instrument, no more capable of rebellion than the hammer is capable of forging itself. And so you continue, day after day, judgment after judgment, another nameless servant in a city that has no memory for kindness. The law is not just, the system is not fair, but you have no choice but to serve it. After all, you are the judge. When you finally take your seat on the raised dais, you are granted the best view in the house. It is a vantage point meant to inspire awe, or perhaps fear, but all it really offers you is a better look at the slow, daily parade of misery that constitutes your audience. From this perch, you see them all, petitioners and defendants, accusers and accused, the curious, the desperate, the malicious, and the merely bored. Each of them plays their part in the ongoing theater, the endless cycle of accusation and judgment. The people who fill your courtroom are not the noble or the powerful. They are not men and women with shining armor, with clever speeches and grand ideas. They are the tired, the poor, the muddied, and the sick. The majority come before you not with bravado, but with a dull, weary resignation. They know what awaits them. They have heard the stories. Their parents and grandparents have stood where they now stand. Justice, here, is as inescapable as the mud in the streets or the hunger in their bellies. You watch as each new defendant is brought forward by the bailiffs. Some try to stand tall, to project innocence or at least indifference, but most simply stare at the floor. Their hands fidget, their faces are drawn and colorless, marked with the unique exhaustion of people who know that no matter what happens here, their lives will not improve. If they are lucky, their punishment will be mild, a day in the stocks, a fine, a whipping. If they are unlucky, they will be branded, mutilated, or sent to the gallows. The unlucky are always the ones with the fewest friends and the least money. You have learned over time to read the room the way a butcher reads a side of beef. There is the boy, eyes darting with animal fear, accused of stealing turnips, likely for his mother, though that fact will never appear in the record. There is the old woman, stooped and toothless, accused by her neighbor of witchcraft, which is just another way of saying she is inconvenient. There are men with their hats in their hands, accused of debts unpaid or taxes evaded, hoping to find some loophole in a system designed to have none. Sometimes there are spectators, neighbors with a grudge, eager to see someone suffer. You see the way they lean forward when the sentences are read, the way their lips twitch in satisfaction at the sound of a whip cracking or the sight of a man dragged away in chains. You wonder occasionally if they know how closely their fates resemble those of the people they mock. If they do, they hide it well. You are struck again and again by how ordinary these people are. There are no villains here, no monsters, only ordinary men and women bent beneath the weight of survival. Their crimes are rarely the result of malice. More often, they are acts of desperation or accidents of circumstance, petty theft, unpaid debts, disputes over a boundary or a borrowed tool. The truly wicked, you suspect, rarely find themselves before your bench. They have the means to bribe, to threaten, to disappear. They are the shadowy hands that move the city's gears, invisible and untouchable. The ones who stand before you are those with nowhere else to go. You find it darkly amusing, in a way, that so many cling to the idea that justice is blind, impartial, a force above the petty realities of life. You know better. You have seen the difference money can make, the way a bribe, slipped quietly to a clerk or a guard, can turn a harsh sentence into a mild one, or make inconvenient evidence disappear. You have seen the effect of reputation, of friendship, of gossip. You have seen how, when a respected tradesman stands accused, the witnesses' memories suddenly become foggy, their stories uncertain. But let a rag picker or a beggar be brought in, and suddenly everyone remembers every detail with perfect clarity. There are times when you catch the eye of a defendant, just for a moment. In that instant, you see not a criminal, but a person, terrified and alone. Sometimes, in the silence that follows a sentence, you hear the faint, hopeless sigh of someone who knows that their fate was decided long before they ever set foot in your courtroom. You pretend not to notice. You have become adept at pretending. After the cases are concluded and the room empties, you are left with the memory of their faces, their postures, the way their hands trembled or their voices broke. You carry these memories like stones in your pockets, heavy and unavoidable. At night, when sleep will not come, you remember the woman accused of poisoning her neighbor's dog, the way she wept, not for herself, but for the certainty that her children would go hungry in her absence. You remember the young man, barely more than a boy, who confessed to theft with such defiance in his eyes that you almost wished you could have let him go. You remember the old man, trembling so hard he could not speak, who was found guilty because silence here is as damning as any evidence. You sometimes wonder what happens to them after they leave your sight. Some are taken to the dungeons beneath your feet, where rats and mold are their only companions. Others are returned to their homes, marked by shame or by pain, forever changed. A few do not return at all, their lives ended in the cold efficiency of a public execution. The people in your courtroom are your mirror, in a sense. Their misery is your inheritance, their fates bound to your decisions. You are not separate from them, though you wear the judge's robe and sit above them in the court. You are as trapped as they are, as powerless to change the system as any defendant who shuffles before your bench. Still, you watch, you listen, you pronounce judgment. The faces blur together, a river of need and pain flowing endlessly through the narrow space between accusation and punishment. And always, always, the machine grinds on, indifferent to your fatigue, to your doubts, to the cost. When the last of the day's cases is done and the courtroom falls silent, you sit for a long time in the fading light. Outside, the city's misery continues, unbroken and unchanging. Inside, you are left alone with the knowledge that tomorrow will bring more of the same. By midday, the procession of the accused begins to blur into a single, ceaseless tide, a parade of misfortune as endless as the hunger in the city. The charges brought before you rarely vary, each one as familiar as your own reflection: petty theft, public drunkenness, insolence toward a town officer, unpaid taxes. The list repeats itself, a chant as old as the cobblestones worn smooth by generations of the desperate. Today, as on most days, the transgressions are small and the sentences are not. The world you inhabit does not tolerate ambiguity or forgive weakness. Here, a loaf of bread taken from a stall is a crime against the order of things, a threat that must be crushed, an example that must be made. The law is written in a language of pain and finality, and it falls to you to speak it aloud. The next accused is a young woman, her hair matted, her hands raw from labor. She is barely older than a child, but the lines on her face speak of years spent hunched over wash basins and scrubbing floors. She stands before you, accused of stealing a strip of linen from the merchant for whom she works. The merchant, a large red faced man, bellows about justice and the sanctity of property. His words fill the air with righteous indignation, and the crowd nods in agreement. They know their own possessions are meager, their security fragile. If theft goes unpunished, what is left for them? You listen, outwardly impassive, while the woman stammers her defense. She had only taken the linen because her child needed binding for a festering wound. The merchant scoffs, the crowd shifts, and you know the verdict before she has finished speaking. You do not need to look at your clerk for guidance. The law is clear. The sentence, 3 days in the stocks, and restitution paid from wages she will not earn. You pronounce it, and the bailiffs move to seize her. Her eyes plead with you, but the machine does not see pleading. The machine requires only obedience. Next, a man accused of drunkenness and shouting obscenities at the church steps. He is thin, hollow eyed, trembling with shame and cold. He cannot pay the fine, and so you sentence him to a whipping, 10 lashes, delivered immediately. He does not protest. He merely lowers his head and follows the guards. The sound of the whip, the sharp intake of breath, the spatter of blood on stone, these are as much a part of your day as the tolling of the church bell. Then there is the old woman, caught picking wild herbs in the Lord's fields. She is accused of poaching, of taking what is not hers. Her defense is simple: she needs to eat. The Lord's reeve, fat and self satisfied, shakes his head and speaks of precedent, of order, of the king's justice. You nod, knowing there is no space for compassion. The penalty is a week in the dungeon, a sentence that may well be a death sentence at her age. Still, you read it aloud, your voice echoing in the cold hall. The scale of the punishments is always disproportionate. A hungry child caught with a stolen apple loses a hand. A baker found to have shorted his flour is pilloried and jeered, pelted with rotten food. A laborer late with his taxes is beaten and left in the square for the crows to pick at. You have seen it so many times, you can recite the punishments by heart. It is not justice, it is ritual, suffering made public, agony made policy. On rare occasions, a crime more serious disrupts the rhythm, an accusation of blasphemy, a whisper of witchcraft, a violent assault. But most days are an endless litany of the petty and the mundane, lives broken for offenses so small they seem laughable if not for the consequences. You have learned to keep your face blank, your voice steady. To hesitate is to invite suspicion. To question is to risk your own position. The townspeople, for their part, accept the sentences with a mix of resignation and satisfaction. They come to watch, to jeer, to assure themselves that the world still makes sense, that wrongdoers are punished and the order of things maintained. There is comfort in the spectacle. It distracts from their own misery. You sometimes wonder if they come to the court not in hope of justice, but to witness the suffering of others, proof, perhaps, that their own suffering is not unique. And so the afternoon drags on, each case a grim echo of the last. You preside over disputes between neighbors, accusations of slander, complaints of unpaid debts. You listen to the same arguments, the same pleas. You know the scripts by heart. You recite the law. You declare the sentence. You watch the bailiffs drag the condemned away. You do not meet their eyes. You cannot afford to. Occasionally, someone dares to beg for mercy, a mother on her knees, a son pleading for his father's life, a friend vouching for the character of the accused. But mercy is not written into the code you are sworn to uphold. Mercy is a story for another world, a world where suffering is not the only currency. At sunset, when the last case is called and the crowd disperses, you are left with the bitter taste of futility. The city is no safer, no better. The punishments meted out in your courtroom do not lessen the hunger, do not clean the water, do not mend the broken homes. They serve only to remind everyone that power is absolute and its hand is heavy. You gather your papers, your clerk trailing behind, and step into the chill of the evening. You feel the eyes of the townsfolk on your back as you pass. Some look away quickly, unwilling to meet your gaze. Others glare openly, their hatred poorly disguised. You are not fooled. You know that in another life, another time, you might just as easily have stood before the bench as behind it. But in this world, today, you are the judge. Tomorrow, you will be the judge again. The cycle will continue, unbroken, until you are replaced or destroyed by the same system you serve. You do not hope for change. Hope, like mercy, is a story for someone else's life. When you first inherited the title of judge, they handed you a book. It was a thick, ponderous tome, bound in cracked leather, its pages stiff with the residue of centuries. The law. That is how everyone refers to it. Not our laws, not the law of the city, but simply, unironically, the law, as if it had existed since the first stone was placed upon mud, as if it were immutable as the rising sun. No one asks who wrote it or how it came to be. You were told to read it, to memorize it, to obey it, never to question it. It is the law that guides your every gesture, your every word in the courtroom, every sentence pronounced. The law does not bend. The law does not care. The law is a list of crimes and a list of punishments set out in ink and pain, covering every possibility with a certainty that would be admirable if it were not so terrifying. The law has no room for extenuating circumstances. Hunger, grief, madness, accident, these are not considerations. The law recognizes only guilt and punishment, with a few rare exceptions reserved for those with money or friends in high places. You sometimes imagine the law as a living thing, a parasite that feeds on the lives of the desperate. It grows fatter with every broken bone, every tear, every body carried from the square. You imagine it whispering in your ear as you sleep, reciting its endless litany of infractions and penalties, reminding you that to err is not human, but criminal. The words themselves are simple, blunt, and final. Let it be known that theft of bread is punished by the loss of the right hand. Let it be known that slander is punished by the stocks and a branding on the tongue. Let it be known that a woman found guilty of witchcraft shall be drowned or burned as the judge sees fit. Let it be known that disobedience to a lawful order shall be punished by the whip, not less than 20 lashes, not more than 50. Let it be known that the word of a noble outweighs that of a commoner in all matters and at all times. The law leaves little to the imagination. Each day you recite it in your head, an incantation against doubt. You learn quickly that it is easier to serve the law than to consider its consequences. Easier, but never painless. Your clerk, that anxious shadow at your side, is its scribe. He writes every verdict, every confession, every sentence in the official ledger, making the law's will permanent. Sometimes you see him flinch as he inks another entry, perhaps a vestigial trace of conscience, or simply the fear that one day his own name will appear in those same lines. The townspeople, for their part, understand the law better than you ever will. They do not protest its harshness. They do not expect justice. They expect only consistency, the same punishment for the same crime every time. Anything else is cause for suspicion, for rumor, for unrest. There is a twisted comfort in the certainty of the law. It is the only certainty most of them will ever know. You have seen, on rare occasions, what happens when the law is not followed. The rumors spread fast. A judge lets a widow go free after she is caught stealing bread. The crowd murmurs, then rumbles, then explodes. The next morning, the baker's stall is smashed, the judge's door painted with crude threats. There must be order, they say. There must be discipline. Without the law, there is only chaos, and chaos is even crueler than justice. The law is old, so old that even the oldest men in the city cannot recall a time when it was otherwise. They speak of past judges, some stern, some cruel, some supposedly kind, but always, always bound by the law. Some tried to bend it, to interpret or to soften it. None lasted long. The system protects itself like a wounded beast, lashing out at anyone who dares to tamper with its wounds. You sometimes wonder if there was ever a time when the law was made by people like those who now suffer under it. If so, that time is as lost as last summer's sunlight. Now the law is like the weather. It arrives, it destroys, and then it passes on, leaving only its marks behind. In the margins of your book of law, written in a crabbed hand by some long forgotten predecessor, you find warnings. Beware the merchant's influence. A kind word may bring suspicion. The people want blood, not explanations. You heed these warnings. You know how fragile your position is. Even the law will not save you if you are found to be soft, or worse, if you are found to be just. There is, of course, another law, older and deeper than the book you keep. It is the law of power. Those with it decide what is just. Those without it endure what is decided. You serve both, whether you like it or not. Every once in a while, you try to remember the exact moment when you stopped seeing the law as a shield and began to feel it as a weight. You cannot. The transition was slow, like the city's rot creeping up from the gutters. You learned eventually that the book in your hands is not a guide, but a tombstone. It marks the burial place of hope, of mercy, of all the things you once thought you might bring to this role. And so, each morning, you recite the law again in your mind and aloud, not for yourself, but for the world that demands its pound of flesh. You do not believe in its righteousness. You no longer even pretend to, but you enforce it. You must. You are, after all, the judge. Testimony. The word sounds dignified, almost holy, as if each person who swears an oath before you is compelled by some higher force to reveal the sacred truth. In reality, testimony in your courtroom is a ritual as flawed and filthy as anything else in your world, a performance carried out not for the pursuit of justice, but for survival, vengeance, or gain. You have lost count of the number of times a sworn statement has been nothing more than a thinly veiled lie or a desperate plea for mercy, delivered with trembling hands and shifty eyes. You have seen it all before. Witnesses who claim perfect memory, recalling the smallest detail when it suits them, and who suddenly forget their own names when pressed on points that might save the accused. You know the choreography. The trembling widow, eager to please the wealthiest man in the room, the neighbor, hunched and eager, recounting every slight and trespass with the venom of someone who has nothing else to hold on to. The merchant, puffed up with certainty, his words weighed down by his purse more than his conscience. You cannot blame them. The city is a place of thin margins and shifting alliances. To be a reliable witness is to survive another day, to curry favor with the right people, to avoid being dragged before the bench oneself. A false oath is dangerous, but so is telling the truth, especially if that truth casts suspicion on someone with power or upsets the fragile balance of enmity that holds the streets together. You are not naive. You know that most cases are decided not on evidence, but on which story is told with greater conviction. The law demands witnesses, and so witnesses are provided. But whether their words are shaped by fact or fear, loyalty or bribe, is rarely important. The ritual matters more than the substance. So long as the forms are observed, so long as someone speaks and someone else listens, the machine can continue its grinding work. Consider the baker's apprentice, accused of watering down the ale. 3 men and 2 women take the stand, each swearing on pain of damnation that they saw him commit the act. Each tells a story slightly different from the others. One saw him at dusk, another at dawn. A third claims to have seen the barrel being tampered with from his bedroom window, though that window faces the wrong street entirely. Their words tangle and overlap, a net designed to catch the unwary. The apprentice protests, but his voice is small, his hands are dirty, and the crowd is eager for a culprit. You know, as they do, that someone must be punished. The testimonies need not align, only converge toward guilt. And then there is the matter of oaths. The law insists that all testimony be sworn before God. You have seen men cross themselves with hands stained in fresh blood, and women swear on the souls of their children, their voices trembling with the effort of feigning honesty. Oaths are currency in your court, spent as easily as coins, and with less consequence. If a lie is discovered, the liar is whipped or fined, but only if it suits the needs of those in charge. Most perjuries go unpunished, buried beneath the day's greater business. On occasion, a child is called to bear witness. The crowd leans forward, hungry for a performance. Children are expected to tell the truth until they do, and it proves inconvenient. You have seen a girl no older than 7 forced to recount the theft of a chicken, her wide eyes darting between her mother and the stern-faced merchant. Her story shifts with each question, not out of deceit, but out of fear. In the end, her confusion is taken as proof of guilt. The accused is flogged, and the crowd disperses, satisfied with the spectacle. There are two, the silent witnesses, those who refuse to speak or whose words are never heard. The mute, the foreigner, the broken, their testimony is not worth the ink required to record it. The law says their silence is suspicious. You have watched a man beaten senseless for failing to explain himself in a language no one in the room understood. Later, you learned he was deaf, but by then, his fate had been sealed. The law does not make room for misunderstanding, it makes room only for punishment. Sometimes, testimonies become weapons in ongoing feuds. Two neighbors argue over the placement of a fence, and soon half the street is lined up to swear to one side or the other, eager to settle old scores in a public arena. You listen, feigning patience, as each story grows more elaborate, each insult more grievous. By the end, you know only that someone must suffer, and you choose based not on truth, but on the needs of order. A fine here, a night in the stocks there, enough to remind everyone of your authority, if not of your wisdom. On rare occasions, a testimony surprises you. A witness steps forward, trembling but resolute, to defend the accused at great personal risk. The crowd mutters, your clerk raises an eyebrow, but you see the truth in their eyes. These moments are rare and dangerous. To show mercy based on such testimony is to invite suspicion, to risk being seen as weak. More often, you note the courage and then do nothing, passing the expected sentence and watching the brave shrink back into the crowd, a little older and much wiser. You are not immune to the irony. The law places such weight on words, yet words are the cheapest thing in your courtroom. For the poor, they are a last, desperate shield. For the rich, a tool to be wielded with all the subtlety of a cudgel. For you, they are a burden. You must sift through them every day, searching for some kernel of truth beneath the layers of fear and self interest, knowing that even if you find it, it will make little difference. You sign the register, your clerk recording each testimony with meticulous care, though both of you know that the record is as much fiction as fact. When the room empties at the end of the day, the words echo in your ears, meaningless syllables in a play that never ends. You tell yourself that truth matters, but here, in your court, it rarely prevails. Testimony is a means to an end. Justice is a formality. The law is an appetite, fed by the words of the desperate, the cunning, and the damned. And you, the judge, are its ever watchful keeper. There are days when you almost forget how thick the walls between classes truly are, until you are forced to see them up close, reinforced in every gesture, every law, every unspoken rule that governs your world. The court, for all its posturing about justice, is a theater of class, with seats assigned before anyone enters, and roles dictated by birth and coin. You sit above, but you are never far from the realization that you too are simply part of the stage set, useful for as long as you play your role and never once presume to leave your place. The city is a patchwork of boundaries you cannot cross. The streets near the square, with their low, sullen houses and perpetual stench, are the realm of the poor, the laborers, the widows, the beggars, the children who run in packs, teeth already filed sharp by hunger and suspicion. These people know their position as surely as they know the taste of sour bread or the pain of cold water on split knuckles. They do not expect fairness. They do not speak of justice except as a curse. Their dealings with the law, your law, are brief and brutal, an accusation, a verdict, a punishment, a return to the mud. Yet even among the poor, there are subtleties. The baker who may have one more coin than the butcher, the widow who rents a corner of her bed to a stranger and thus survives another winter. These gradations are invisible to the lords and the wealthy, but you see them every day, flickering at the edges of every case. Even in misery, there are hierarchies. You watch, day after day, as the rich glide through the city with a different kind of armor. Their boots are dry, their cloaks thick, their eyes untroubled. They move quickly through the market, trailed by servants, never pausing to meet the eyes of those who shrink away. Their presence is a command, a statement that this world belongs to them, that the suffering is for others. When they do find themselves in your court, which is rare, they come with advocates, with purses, with the smug assurance that the law was built to serve them, not to judge them. The sentences for the rich are not written in the same ink as for the poor. A theft by a noble's son is a misunderstanding, easily resolved with a word or a coin. A fight among merchants becomes a dispute settled behind closed doors. When a wealthy widow is accused of poisoning her neighbor, the case vanishes and the records are quietly altered. For the poor, there is no such erasure, no kindly word or hidden bargain. Their suffering is public and instructive, a lesson to others. Your court is built on this division, maintained by it. The benches for the commoners are hard, splintered wood, while the rare seats reserved for the elite are cushioned, placed nearer the fire in winter. The clerk, who has learned to distinguish the shuffling of peasants from the measured stride of a noble, announces their cases with a different timbre, an unconscious deference that infects the room like a chill. The bailiffs are more careful with certain prisoners, more thorough with others. The law codifies these differences with unblushing frankness. The word of a noble outweighs that of a commoner in all matters and at all times. It is right there in the book. An article as cold and unchangeable as the stone beneath your feet. You have seen an entire street condemned on the testimony of one merchant, and a poor woman hanged because she could not name a sponsor with influence. You have seen a child whipped for speaking out of turn, while a wealthy man walks free after ruining 3 families in a game of chance. It is not that the rich do not break the law. They do, and often it is simply that their laws are different. Their transgressions are private, their consequences negotiated in shadowy corners, never in the glare of the public square. You suspect sometimes that the worst crimes are those you will never hear about, sins too large or too profitable to reach your bench. Still, you play your part. When a member of the Merchants' Guild is brought before you, you address him with a measure of formality, not because you respect him, but because to do otherwise would be an invitation for trouble. The city runs on commerce, and commerce is more sacred than justice. If a guildsman is punished too harshly, trade suffers, tempers flare, and your superiors take notice. Punish a noble, and you might not live to see the next market day. You recall a time, not long ago, when a poor mason was accused of damaging a noble's carriage. By accident, a chip of stone thrown from his hammer. The noble demanded a public flogging and a year's wages as compensation. The mason's defense was pointless. His hands, cracked and bleeding, trembled as he spoke. You delivered the sentence with the practiced monotone of someone who has already learned that protest is futile. Later, you heard that the mason's family was evicted, their belongings thrown into the street. The noble's carriage was repaired the next day. No one remembered the mason's name. You sometimes wonder if there is any way for a person born without wealth or title to move upward, to cross the invisible barriers that divide your world. You know the stories of soldiers who became knights, of merchants who bought their way into the guilds, but you also know these are the exceptions, whispered as consolation on long winter nights. For most, the boundaries are as permanent as scars. Even you, judge though you may be, are acutely aware of your own place. You are not one of the great lords, not a bishop, not even a guild master. Your power is borrowed, conditional, and always at risk of being withdrawn. You enforce the divisions, but you do not escape them. At night, as you walk home through the emptying streets, you hear laughter from the upper windows, warmth and light that will never reach you or the people you sentence. Below, in the dark, the poor huddle together for warmth, trading stories and scraps of food, their eyes darting to every shadow. Above, behind heavy doors, the rich drink, sing, and make plans that will shape the city long after your hand is too feeble to sign your name. You do not envy them. You do not pity the poor. You simply recognize the order of things as immutable as the law itself. You are neither hero nor villain in this arrangement. You are merely the one who names the difference, who draws the line again and again, even as it cuts through your own life. You are the judge. The boundaries are everywhere, and none of you are ever truly free. You are called the bearer of justice, though the title feels heavier and more ironic with each passing year. Justice, in your world, is a thing talked about in sermons and decrees, depicted on city banners as a blindfolded woman holding scales. In reality, you know that justice is neither blind nor balanced. It sees with one eye open, squinting at coins, squinting at names, forever tilting toward those who built the city's walls and write its laws. It is your task to maintain the illusion. Every morning you don your judge's robe, threadbare, but still a badge of authority. You sit behind your heavy desk, high enough to make you seem above the crowd. Your clerk arranges the cases, your bailiffs call the accused, the crowd gathers, and the day's business begins anew. All eyes are on you, awaiting the pronouncements that will shape the fate of their neighbors, or perhaps themselves. You have learned to wear your mask well. Your face is a study in composure, unreadable, unflinching. You speak in a voice that is never too soft, never too loud. You give your verdicts in measured tones, each word deliberate, each sentence final. The people must believe in the process, even if they do not believe in the outcome. The city, you have come to realize, is held together by nothing more than the daily performance of justice, by the fear that there is order, that someone is watching, that there are rules, even if the rules serve only to grind them down. In your more cynical moments, you see yourself as the city's scapegoat, a necessary figure to absorb the anger and frustration that the real rulers will never allow to reach them. You are the hand that delivers the pain, the voice that says guilty, the face that the desperate curse on their way to the stocks or the gallows. You are feared, sometimes hated, occasionally pitied, but rarely respected. No one thanks the judge. No one brings gifts. On feast days, your door is passed by in silence. To be a judge is to be isolated, set apart by the role that requires you to hurt others in the name of the law. But there is another side, one you see in the flicker of a parent's eyes when you sentence a thief who threatened their children, or in the rare nod of gratitude from a merchant whose debts are finally repaid. For a few, justice is not just a word, but a shield, however battered, however thin. You know that order is better than chaos, even when order is cruel. Chaos, in your world, is death, riots, plague, houses burned in the night, mobs tearing through the streets unchecked. The price of safety is high, and you are the one forced to collect it. Your decisions are supposed to be impartial, but you know how impossible that is. Every case is laced with uncertainty and suspicion. A man accused of theft. Did he truly steal, or is he the scapegoat for a richer man's crime? A woman accused of poisoning. Was it murder, or simply the misfortune of a sickness blamed on her by fearful neighbors? You listen to their words, weigh their trembling voices, search for some scrap of truth that might guide your hand. Sometimes, in the privacy of your mind, you long for a clear sign, an unmistakable right or wrong. But there are only ever competing stories, and always the law waiting at your side, whispering its prescribed answers. Mercy is not encouraged. The law, as you have learned, does not reward the soft hearted. To let someone go is to invite questions, to encourage chaos, to show weakness. If you grant leniency, it must be disguised, shrouded in a technicality, in the confusion of records, in the careful delay of punishment, until the crowd's attention moves elsewhere. It is a dangerous game, and you have seen others lose it. Your role, then, is to carry the weight, to make the choices that no one else will make. You cannot blame the clerk or the bailiff or the crowd. Only you are authorized to pronounce the sentence, and only you will be remembered for it. The condemned sometimes beg you for mercy, sometimes curse you. Some try to bribe you, though never successfully. The city's rulers watch your decisions carefully, not out of concern for justice, but out of fear that their own order might be disrupted by too much kindness or too much severity. You must walk a narrow line, pleasing everyone and no one. The rituals of your office are both comfort and curse. The reading of the charges, the questioning of witnesses, the recitation of the law, so familiar you could speak it in your sleep. You have performed these acts so many times that they have become reflex, muscle memory, a shield between you and the human cost of your decisions. Only at night, in the rare moments when sleep comes, do the faces return. The man who wept for his family, the girl who screamed her innocence, the old woman who spat on the floor and told you that you would answer to a higher judge in the end. Yet every morning you return. You put on the robe, you lift the gavel, you call the room to order. Your task is endless, and you suspect that is the point. The cycle must be unbroken. Justice, as the city imagines it, must be constantly seen, heard, feared. If it ever falters, if you ever waver, the illusion crumbles, and the city is reminded how thin the veneer truly is. You are the bearer of justice, and the cost of that burden is measured in sleepless nights and silent tears, in meals taken alone, in the suspicion of neighbors and the indifference of the powerful. You cannot change the world, you can only enforce its rules. And so you do each day, each hour, without hope or reward. For this is your place, and this is your purpose. You are the judge. Justice, for what it is worth, ends with you. The process of passing judgment, at least as your city has constructed it, is an elaborate dance, one that fools outsiders into thinking there is fairness in the choreography. In reality, it is a cycle of ritual humiliation, a public performance where the end is always the same. You, seated high above, are both conductor and executioner. The people parade before you, and you play your part with the precision of a man who has performed the same motions so many times that he no longer remembers another way. It begins, always, with the accused standing alone in the center of the cold stone floor. No one stands with them. There is no advocate, no learned defender to speak on their behalf. Even if there were, such voices would be drowned out by the weight of tradition, by the certainty that the accused is guilty until proven otherwise, and proof is always a rare and expensive thing. The city prides itself on order, not on fairness. The clerk reads the charges. His voice is thin and reedy, echoing off the walls, making each accusation sound more severe than the last. The accused flinches at the mention of their crime, theft, blasphemy, violence, sometimes something as trivial as speaking out of turn to a city guard. There is a pause, a moment of forced solemnity, while you study the trembling figure before you. Questions follow, but they are rarely true questions. They are statements in disguise, traps laid by custom and habit. Did you steal the bread? Did you curse the priest? Did you fight in the street? The answers matter far less than the posture of the accused, the quiver in their voice, the direction of their gaze. The city has learned to read guilt in posture, to demand contrition as proof of innocence. Defiance is dangerous, silence is fatal. Witnesses are called, if there are any. Their words swirl in the air, each one a note in the dirge of the proceedings. They swear their oaths, repeat what they have been told to remember, point fingers with shaking hands. You know, most of them are afraid. Afraid of the accused, afraid of you, afraid of the unspoken consequences of a story that strays too far from the accepted script. Occasionally, someone will offer a scrap of genuine truth, but such scraps are quickly swallowed by the machinery of the court. You listen with a mask of indifference. It would not do to appear swayed, to reveal even a flicker of sympathy or disgust. The audience watches you, always hungry for signs of favor or anger, for any clue about which way your verdict will fall. The accused, for their part, usually avoid your gaze, as if the very sight of you could tip the scales further against them. The law is read aloud. This, too, is ritual, an incantation against doubt, a reassurance to all present that the outcome is preordained, that you, the judge, are merely the instrument of something greater and older than yourself. The words fall heavy in the room. Let it be known that theft is punished by the removal of the offending hand. Let it be known that slander is punished by the stocks for 3 days and 3 nights. No one questions the law. To do so is to risk being pulled before the bench yourself. Sometimes the accused attempts a plea for mercy. They weep, they protest, they promise to change, they offer the little they have, a coin, a ring, a blessing. On rare occasions, they attempt to bribe you openly. You turn these offers aside, not because of principle, but because the city is always watching, always ready to destroy anyone who disrupts the fragile balance of authority. You pronounce the verdict in a voice stripped of emotion. It is important that you sound inevitable, like winter or death. The sentence is recorded by your clerk, whose hand rarely wavers. The accused collapses or screams, or stands numb and silent. The bailiffs drag them away to the stocks, the whip, the dungeon, or, on those rare and final occasions, the gallows. The audience responds as they always do. Some whisper approval, others avert their eyes. A few allow themselves a small, satisfied smile, glad that someone else has taken the fall. The machinery moves forward, gears grinding, and you call the next case. There is no time for reflection, no time to question. If you pause, if you falter, the entire performance threatens to collapse. At times, the process takes on a feverish quality, a haze of repetition, faces and crimes blending together until all that remains is the unending echo of your own voice. You lose track of names, of stories, of the difference between justice and cruelty. You become a functionary, a mouthpiece for rules you did not write, a guardian of order that does not care about the cost. Still, you perform the ritual. It is what keeps the city together, what keeps you in your seat, what keeps the mob outside the gates rather than within. You tell yourself, as you lower the gavel, that without this order, there would be chaos. You remind yourself, as you listen to another plea for mercy, that chaos is always worse. But in the moments when the room is empty and your mask slips, you remember the faces: the boy who lied because he was hungry, the mother who stole because she had nothing left to sell, the man who protested his innocence until he was too weak to speak. You remember them, even as you know that remembering changes nothing. You rise from your bench at the end of the day, your body stiff, your mind heavy with the residue of judgment. You step out into the gathering dark, knowing that tomorrow the process will begin again. There will be more names, more crimes, more sentences, more pain. This is justice as your city demands it. This is your role. You are the judge, and judgment never ends. There are days when the routine of the courtroom is shattered by something heavier, something final, the day of an execution. These days arrive like storms, announced with whispers that ripple through the city's alleys and squares. The gallows are swept, the block is sanded, the executioner sharpens his blade and checks his knots. The whole city is drawn, inevitably, to the spectacle, pulled not by duty, but by a deep, ancient hunger that seems to swell with the scent of blood and the promise of an ending. You are not immune to the tension. You wake before dawn, feeling the weight of the day pressing against your chest, a silent premonition. There is no breakfast on these mornings, only the sour taste of anxiety as you dress in your cleanest robe, the one reserved for occasions when justice must not only be done, but be seen to be done. It is a day for public example, a day to show the city what happens when the law is broken, when order is threatened. The condemned are brought from the dungeons at first light. They are always smaller than you remember, shrunk by fear and starvation, their faces hollowed by days or weeks without sleep. You try not to meet their eyes. There is nothing you can offer them now except the mercy of a swift end, if such a thing can be called mercy. The square fills as the sun rises, a restless crowd pressed tight against the wooden barriers. Children perch on shoulders. Old women clutch scraps of cloth to their faces. Men jostle for position with elbows and curses. Vendors move through the crowd, selling sour wine and stale bread, making a festival of the execution. Laughter mingles with prayers, anticipation with dread. You stand above it all, high on the stone steps, your presence required not as comfort, but as a warning. This is your justice. This is the lesson. The executioner waits, a figure both feared and necessary. He is anonymous in his hood, faceless so that the crowd can hate him without knowing his name. You know him well enough. He is as trapped in his role as you are in yours. For a small purse and a handful of privileges, he will be shunned in every tavern, spat at in every alley, but never quite replaced. There is always someone willing to wield the axe if the price is right and the need is great. You read the sentence aloud. Your voice must carry across the square, clear and unwavering. The words are ritual, each syllable weighted by centuries of repetition. For the crime of murder, for the crime of heresy, for theft, for treason, for blasphemy. The crowd murmurs, some with approval, some with hidden doubts. You do not flinch. You cannot afford to. The condemned is brought forward, stumbling or carried, sometimes silent, sometimes screaming. Once, long ago, you saw a woman laugh as the noose was slipped around her neck, a laughter that haunted you for weeks. More often, there are tears, prayers, pleas for a mercy no one in the crowd expects to see granted. Sometimes a priest is present, offering last rites. Sometimes the priest is part of the accusation. You notice the faces in the crowd. Some are eager, eyes bright with anticipation. Others are pale, hands clasped tight around each other's shoulders. Children watch with the blank, absorbing curiosity of those who have not yet learned to hide their fascination. The first time you saw a man hanged, you were younger than most of these children. You did not sleep for a week. Now you rarely remember the names. The execution itself is fast, almost mundane in its brutality. A nod from you, a gesture from the bailiff, and the act is carried out. The blade falls, the rope snaps taut, the crowd gasps as one. For a moment, there is silence, an absence of noise so profound it feels sacred. Then the sound returns, a cheer, a sob, the call of a vendor hawking his wares, the shuffling of feet as the crowd begins to disperse, already hungry for the next distraction. You remain at your post until the end. It is your duty to watch, to bear witness, to make certain that the law has been satisfied and the message delivered. There can be no question of justice not being done, not here, not now. Your presence sanctifies the act, gives it the weight of inevitability. Afterward, the body is displayed for a time, a warning, a lesson, a grim trophy. Sometimes, when the wind shifts, you catch the smell, blood, sweat, the sickly sweetness of death. It lingers on your clothes, in your hair, even after you return to your chamber and change into something less official. The city, too, carries the residue of the day. The children play at executions in the alleys, their games a grotesque mimicry of what they have witnessed. The vendors pack away their goods, already counting their profits. The crowd thins, but for days afterward, people speak of little else. They repeat every detail, every cry, every twitch and struggle. In the homes of the poor, parents invoke your name and the executioners to frighten unruly children into obedience. You are left with the silence that comes after, the hollow that no spectacle can fill. You wonder, as you have wondered before, whether the crowd sees justice or only the shadow of vengeance. Whether the lesson learned is that order is maintained, or simply that suffering is inescapable. The city claims that public executions keep the peace, that they serve as deterrent and warning, but you see the truth. They are the city's holiday, a ritual feast of violence that unites the people in their fear and their relief that for today, at least, it is someone else's neck. In the evenings that follow, you find your thoughts returning to the faces of the condemned, not as criminals, but as people. You remember their final words, their trembling hands, the look in their eyes when hope finally died. You remind yourself that it is not your place to question, that doubt is a privilege you cannot afford. The law is satisfied, the order is preserved. You have done your duty. And yet, when you close your eyes, you see the gallows standing empty in the moonlight, a silent monument to the work that never truly ends. You are the judge. The city sleeps for another night. The city you serve is ancient, built layer upon layer by the desperation and ambition of the long dead. It sprawls across the muddy land, its crooked lanes and sagging rooftops a living monument to all the things people will do to survive. Each generation builds atop the ruins of the last, patching broken stones, shoring up crumbling walls, filling the gaps with whatever can be scavenged. There is an order to it, but not a logic you can see. You move through its streets every day, and still you do not understand it. Perhaps no one does. In the rare moments when you are not at court, you sometimes wander through the alleys and markets, not as a judge, but as a silent observer. You listen to the arguments at the well, the bargains in the marketplace, the whispered deals in shadowed corners. You watch the people trade, cheat, steal, pray, and suffer. Their world is one of constant motion, each day an improvisation played out with the tools at hand: wit, guile, endurance, and occasionally brute force. It is a society shaped by scarcity. There is never enough of anything: not food, not warmth, not time. The rich hoard their goods behind iron gates, while the poor share and steal and beg, circling always around the possibility of starvation. Families are large because children die young. Alliances are brittle because trust is a luxury. Even laughter, when it comes, is edged with bitterness, as if the city itself resents the sound. You see men beaten in the streets for debts too small to remember, and women dragged by their hair for accusations no one will prove or disprove. You see children sent out to beg before they can walk, old men turned out of homes when they can no longer work. The strongest survive, but the cleverest thrive. A lie, you realize, is worth more than a prayer, and hope is worth less than a full stomach. On feast days, the city attempts a kind of collective joy. The squares fill with music, the markets with colored banners, and for a few hours, the people try to forget the weight of daily life. But even these celebrations are laced with danger. A spilled drink becomes a brawl, a thrown stone an accusation. You watch from the edge, the outsider who keeps the order, knowing that beneath the surface, every laugh is a defense, every dance a distraction from the realities that will return before the dawn. You cannot escape the sense that the city is a living thing, a beast that devours and discards as it pleases. Its moods are unpredictable. A rumor can send the crowd surging through the streets, torches and pitchforks in hand, as likely to turn on each other as on the chosen victim. The city is always hungry for a scapegoat. More than once, you have felt that hunger directed at you. It is a society that breeds suspicion and fear of famine, of disease, of strangers, and above all, of change. You cannot understand their rituals, not truly. The ways they mourn their dead, loudly, angrily, throwing curses at the heavens, or the way they bless their food, even when there is nothing to bless. You do not understand the secrets they keep, the small kindnesses offered in darkness. A loaf of bread left on a doorstep, a whispered warning about a coming raid, a song sung to a child whose name will not survive the winter. You do not understand how they go on, day after day, under burdens that would break you if they were yours alone. And yet, you see their strength. There is resilience here, a hard, stubborn refusal to surrender. The people grieve loudly, but they also laugh loudly, fight loudly, love fiercely. They remember every slight, every kindness, every injustice, especially the injustices. You see the looks they give you in the court and in the street, the subtle ways they communicate without words. You are feared, perhaps hated, but you are also needed. Your presence is another fact of their world, another stone in the city's foundation. They know how to survive you as they survive everything else. Still, you remain separate. The robes you wear, the words you speak, the authority you carry, these things create a gulf that cannot be crossed. You are alone, even in a crowd. Your power sets you apart, but it also isolates you. You will never be invited to share in their sorrows or their small, fierce joys. You will never be welcomed to the fire on a cold night or offered a place at the table when the bread runs out. You are the judge, and that means you stand outside, always watching, never belonging. Sometimes you wonder if the city itself recognizes this, if it has shaped its people to be suspicious of anyone who claims to speak for the law. You suspect it has. The city, after all, is older and wiser than any of its inhabitants. It remembers betrayals that you have never heard of, rebellions put down before your father's father was born. The people have learned caution the hard way. They do not trust easily, and when they do, it is never for long. There are moments, brief, rare, when you almost feel you understand. When you see a mother sheltering her child from the rain, or an old man sharing the last of his soup with a stray dog, you sense something deeper than fear or calculation. But these moments pass quickly, swept away by the demands of your office, the relentless tick of duty and necessity. You return each night to your chamber, shut the door against the noise and cold, and tell yourself that it is enough to be respected, if not loved, that the order you maintain is worth the cost, even if you cannot truly comprehend the lives it controls. Still, the city goes on, sprawling and restless, a riddle you cannot solve, a story you are allowed only to judge, never to join. You are the judge, and society is your sentence. There are other judges in your city, though you rarely see them outside the confines of official duties. Each of you is assigned a territory, a cluster of streets, a handful of markets, a slice of the ancient sprawl, and you rule your domain with as much authority and isolation as any castellan in a crumbling keep. You might imagine there is camaraderie in this shared burden, some secret fellowship among those who mete out the city's punishments. But in truth, your connection with the other judges is a brittle, uneasy thing. You recognize them by the lines on their faces, the stiffness in their posture, the weariness in their eyes, but you do not trust them. You know they do not trust you. You cross paths in the shadowed corridors of the courthouse, or at the rare formal feasts where your presence is required more as decoration than for any real purpose. Here, beneath banners that are meant to inspire pride, but mostly collect dust, you exchange brief, guarded greetings. Each judge wears the same uniform, worn robe, iron medallion, a false air of certainty. Each carries the same silent ledger of grudges and regrets. You know a few by reputation. Judge Eberhard, who is famous for his severity, who once ordered a man hanged for speaking ill of the king's dog. Judge Gisela, who is rumored to take bribes, though no one can prove it and few even care. Judge Dietmar, who rarely speaks and is said to drink too much, but whose court is always orderly and whose punishments are precise. You have seen these people from a distance, presiding over their own ceremonies of pain. Occasionally, one of them is replaced, quietly, efficiently, the city's machinery swallowing the loss with barely a hiccup. Your interactions are marked by a careful lack of intimacy. When you do converse, it is about procedures and statutes, never about doubt or exhaustion. You talk about the weather, the latest edict from the city council, the rising price of grain. You do not talk about the faces that haunt your sleep or the growing weight in your chest after every public execution. It would be dangerous, even foolish, to confess such weaknesses. One never knows when a casual remark might become a rumor, or a rumor an accusation. There are moments of accidental honesty, caught in a glance exchanged after a particularly grim sentence, or in the brief pause before a new case is called. In those moments, you recognize a shared suffering, a mutual resignation. You wonder if the others, like you, once hoped to make a difference, to serve something greater than themselves. You wonder when they learned, as you have, that the system does not reward hope. The city likes to pretend that the judges are a unified body, a pillar of unshakable order. It spreads stories of your unity, your incorruptibility, your wisdom, but you know the truth. Each of you is alone, bound by duty and suspicion, by the knowledge that power here is as uncertain as a candle flame in a winter draft. The higher officials, lords, bishops, councilmen, pit you against each other, sometimes subtly, sometimes openly. A disputed border, a contradictory order, a sudden investigation into irregularities. Each of you knows that a colleague's fall can mean your own advancement, or, just as easily, your own undoing. You recall the case of Judge Matthias. He was not particularly cruel, nor notably kind. He followed the law, dispensed sentences, and tried not to make enemies. Yet when the council needed someone to blame for a riot that began in his quarter, Matthias became the scapegoat. Whispers of favoritism, of carelessness, of misplaced mercy swirled around him. Within a week, he was removed from office and vanished from the city. No one speaks of him now. The lesson was clear. Do your job, but never believe you are untouchable. You sometimes catch yourself watching the other judges during trials or meetings, searching for signs of fear or fatigue. Occasionally, you see them do the same to you. There is no loyalty here, only mutual recognition of shared risk. You maintain your distance, cultivate the appearance of confidence, and trust no one with your secrets. At times, you envy those who serve as priests or merchants, whose alliances are open and whose ambitions are clear. A priest can confess his doubts to a higher power. A merchant can curse his rivals openly in the tavern. You, by contrast, are trapped between secrecy and spectacle, forced always to perform, always to conceal. When the rare official gathering ends and you part ways with the others, there is no sense of solidarity, only a palpable relief that for now you have survived another meeting. Even so, you cannot help but feel a strange kinship with your fellow judges. It is not friendship, not even respect, but a kind of grim understanding. You know the cost of your office, and you suspect they do as well. You imagine that, like you, they go home to empty rooms, haunted by the memory of the condemned and the knowledge that justice, as it is practiced here, is less about right and wrong than about order and obedience. Occasionally, you hear rumors of a judge driven mad by guilt, of one who secretly aids the poor, of another who keeps a journal of every case, hoping that someday someone will care about the truth. You wonder if these stories are true or simply comforting lies invented to give the city the illusion that someone, somewhere, is still fighting for what is right. In the end, your relationships with the other judges are a reflection of the system itself, built on necessity, maintained by fear, and doomed to remain forever distant. You serve together, but you are always alone. You are the judge. They are the only ones who truly understand what that means. And even then, understanding is not the same as relief. Every evening, when the last case is closed and the echo of your voice has faded from the stones, you find yourself alone with your thoughts. The mask you wear, the one of composure and certainty, of absolute obedience to the law, becomes harder to maintain as the silence grows. There is no audience now, no clerk or bailiff to impress with your steadiness, no crowd to intimidate with the weight of your robes. In the emptiness of your own chamber, stripped of ceremony, you are left with only the truth of your feelings. Gnawing doubts, small, persistent regrets, and a weariness so deep it feels physical. You did not become a judge because you relished power or believed in your own wisdom. Perhaps, once, you thought you might do some good, that you could temper severity with sense, or at least see that the rules were applied with something resembling fairness. But such ambitions have long since been eroded by the relentless tide of necessity. You now suspect that the only real qualification for your position is the ability to carry out your duties without breaking, at least not in public. Doubt is a luxury you cannot afford during the day, but it comes to you each night, slipping through the cracks in your resolve. You think of the faces that passed before your bench, men and women you have sentenced to pain, to exile, to death. Sometimes you remember their names, sometimes just the particular way they pleaded or the look in their eyes as the verdict fell. You recall, with particular clarity, the moments when you almost wavered. The boy who stole bread for his starving sister, the mother who lied to shield her child, the old man who confessed to a crime he could not possibly have committed just to end the suspicion that hounded him through the streets. You try to comfort yourself with the arguments you have heard 1,000 times. The law must be upheld, or there will be chaos. The weak and the poor are protected by order, not by mercy. You are a servant of something larger than yourself, a cog in the machinery of justice, not its master. Yet, as the years drag on, these mantras ring increasingly hollow. You have seen too much of the world's disorder to believe that it is ever truly tamed. You have witnessed too many injustices sanctioned by the law to trust in its wisdom. Guilt is your nightly companion. It settles into your bones, dull and unrelenting. You wonder often if the city would be any worse without your judgments, or if you are merely a convenient tool, a face for the suffering that is required to keep the peace. On the rare nights when sleep comes, your dreams are filled with echoes, the cries of the punished, the jeers of the crowd, the soft, resigned sighs of those who never expected mercy and received only what they knew was coming. There are days when you imagine simply walking away, leaving the robe folded on your chair, disappearing into the faceless crowd. But you know there is no true escape. Judges do not retire. They are removed, quietly and often violently, or they die in office, their names quickly forgotten, their fates unremarked. The city would appoint another in your place. The cases would continue. The sentences would fall as before. Nothing would change except the name written in the ledgers. You sometimes envy the certainty of others. The priests who claim to see the will of God in every verdict, the merchants who worship at the altar of profit, the guards who relish the simplicity of violence. Their lives seem free of the constant, suffocating awareness of consequence. You suspect, however, that this certainty is as much a mask as yours, a necessary lie to survive in a world that demands so much and gives so little in return. There are moments when you consider rebellion, however small. A lighter sentence here, a moment's hesitation there, a refusal to rush a judgment, a careful oversight in the record that spares someone an extra day in the stocks. These gestures are risky, dangerous. The city watches, and the system punishes deviation. Even your clerk is trained to note any irregularity, to record anything that might look like leniency. You have learned to move cautiously, to wrap your doubts in layers of caution, to hide your mercy behind the machinery of process. Still, you cannot help but wonder if any of it matters. Are you making a difference, however slight, or are you merely prolonging the suffering by lending it an air of legitimacy? Would a crueler judge be better or worse? Would a braver one be punished more swiftly? You have no answers, only questions that spiral, unanswered, through the long nights. Sometimes, in your darkest moments, you feel as though you are suffocating, trapped not just by the stone walls of your chamber, but by the expectations and memories that haunt you. The faces of the condemned blur together, a silent accusation, a reminder that you too are sentenced by your own role. You are not free, you are not blameless, and yet each morning you rise again. You put on the robe, take your seat, recite the law. The doubts are folded away with the rest of your private self, hidden from view as you resume your part in the ceaseless performance. This is your life now, a series of judgments, a chain of days, a long, slow erosion of hope. You are the judge. You have no right to falter. But at night, when no one is watching, you remember what it feels like to wish that you could. As the days drag on, you learn that you are never truly alone in the business of suffering. All around you, other figures haunt the corridors of power: local lords, city councilors, captains of the watch, clerics, and the endless parade of minor officials whose hands are forever outstretched for bribes or favors. They are the city's hidden anatomy, moving beneath the surface, directing its movements, shaping its moods and fates with a precision you can never quite trace, but always feel. If the city is a beast, then these authorities are its teeth and claws. Their presence is everywhere and nowhere, felt in every whispered rumor, every sudden edict, every mysterious disappearance. The law, for all its iron pronouncements, is a flexible tool in their grasp, bent or twisted to suit the demands of the moment, never so rigid that it cannot be circumvented with the right word or coin. You enforce their will as much as the letter of the law, and sometimes you suspect far more. You have learned to recognize their signs: the sudden arrival of a noble's courier with an unsigned letter, the veiled warning from a city scribe, the heavy silence that falls in the room when a case touches a family with influence. There are times when you are expected to look the other way, to pass over an obvious crime, or render a verdict that does not fit the facts. The system is designed to ensure compliance, rewards for obedience, ruin for resistance. To defy a local authority, even for the sake of justice, is to invite scrutiny, accusation, and likely removal. It is not always open threats. Sometimes it is the hint of a favor, the promise of a seat at the council table, or the discreet offer of a purse heavier than your annual wage. More often, it is a subtler force, the knowledge that a judge who rocks the boat finds himself adrift, without allies, without protection. You have seen it happen to others. You have watched as judges who refused to cooperate were quietly disgraced, stripped of their rank, or even vanished altogether, their names erased from memory. The authorities move quickly and without mercy. Their power is absolute, even as it is invisible. Corruption is not an accident, but a method of survival. The city's leaders know that the law, left untempered, would starve the rich along with the poor punish the strong as well as the weak. So they keep a hand on the scales. They ensure that verdicts are never too disruptive, that justice never interferes with profit or stability. You become adept at reading between the lines, at navigating the ever changing landscape of alliances and betrayals. Each case is a test, not only of your knowledge of the law, but of your understanding of who, in that moment, truly rules the city. You learn to accept certain injustices as necessary. The Lord's son, who escapes a whipping for assaulting a merchant's daughter. The priest, whose theft from the poor box is redefined as a clerical error. The merchant, whose forged weights are quietly replaced before the city inspectors arrive. There are crimes that are never officially recognized, wounds that are never named. You see them in the bruises on the faces of the desperate, in the hollow eyes of those who dare not speak. These, you know, are the true costs of power. There are moments when you try to intervene, carefully, quietly, a lighter sentence, a word in the right ear, a refusal to escalate a petty feud into something larger. These acts are never enough. The machine corrects itself, closes ranks, and ensures that order is preserved. Your small acts of mercy are forgotten, but your failures are always remembered. Worse, you come to realize that you yourself are not immune. You too must play the game, making compromises, choosing which injustices to ignore and which to punish, constantly aware that a single mistake could cost you everything. You cultivate a reputation for impartiality, for steadiness, for a kind of blank, unquestioning obedience. It is a mask that becomes harder to remove with each passing year. At times, you are approached by the truly powerful, lords who own half the city, clerics whose sermons decide the fate of whole neighborhoods, captains whose patrols can turn a riot into a massacre or a festival. They speak softly, always. They ask little, but they make it clear that their requests are not to be denied. If you do as you are told, you are left alone. If not, you are reminded of the fates of others, whispered late at night in the halls outside your chamber. Sometimes the darkness is almost comical, a parade of fools and villains so blatant in their schemes that you wonder if they believe themselves immortal. You watch them drink and plot, laughing over wine, never dreaming that their fortunes could change. But you have seen the wheel turn. You have watched as powerful men fell from grace overnight, dragged into the square by a mob, or quietly poisoned in their own beds. The authorities are ruthless, but they are not loyal, not even to each other. The petty corruption of the lower officials is almost comforting by comparison. The scribe who changes a date for a coin, the guard who looks away for a crust of bread, the bailiff who loses a piece of evidence if it means a night of safety for his family. These are men and women like yourself, caught in the endless grind, doing what they must to survive. Their sins are small, almost understandable, and you feel for them even as you condemn them. You find yourself wondering if there is a way to serve justice at all in such a world. The law is supposed to be your shield, your guide, but here it is just another tool, another weapon wielded by those with the power to make the rules. With a certainty that chills you, that as long as the city endures, there will always be those above the law and those crushed beneath it. At night, when the corridors are quiet and your work is done, you remember the whispered promises, the threats, the bribes. You wonder how many times you have failed, not just yourself, but the people you are meant to serve. You know you will never have an answer. You are the judge. But in this world, that means you serve not only the law, but all the darkness behind it. If the law is the bones of your city, then religion is its blood, seeping through every crack and stain. The priests are everywhere, robes black as midnight, voices low and urgent, eyes that seem to look straight through you. Their churches rise from the muck like stone ships, always just beyond the reach of the poor, always open to the wealthy, always eager to collect the copper coins of the desperate. The bells ring out at dawn and dusk, marking time for lives that rarely change, lives so hard that the promise of another world is the only comfort most will ever know. You learned quickly that religion is not merely a matter of faith. It is a tool, a weapon, a source of order no less powerful than the codes you recite in court. Priests and bishops are woven into every power structure, often more feared than the lords or city captains. Their word is law in matters of the soul, and their approval or disapproval can shape a life or end it. You have seen it more than once, a whisper of heresy, a rumor of witchcraft, and suddenly a family is gone, a home emptied, a name erased from the city's memory. When you judge, you do so under the gaze of the saints. Icons line your courtroom, stern faces painted on wooden panels, eyes watching from shadowed corners. Each morning, before the day's cases, you recite the required prayer. It is not optional. You know how many eyes are counting your words, weighing your piety. A judge who doubts, who hesitates, who fails to invoke the blessings of the church is already under suspicion. The presence of the clergy is a constant. Sometimes a priest attends the hearings, sitting just behind your bench, nodding or frowning at your decisions. Sometimes they approach you privately, with advice, with warnings, with requests for leniency or severity. You never know if they speak for themselves or for some greater, more secret counsel. Their power is invisible but absolute. To anger them is to invite a world of trouble, the withdrawal of blessings, the poison of rumor, the slow but certain erosion of support from your peers and superiors. You have watched religion work its will in the city. The grand festivals that fill the square with color and noise, the processions where the poor shuffle in borrowed rags, the rituals that promise forgiveness for a price. Confession is a public act as much as a private one. People stand in long lines to whisper their sins, desperate for absolution, terrified of what will happen if their secrets are not forgiven. The priests listen, judge, and advise, but also collect. There is no forgiveness without payment. It is a system as unyielding as the law, and in some ways, more effective. At least in court, the evidence must be seen and heard. In church, only suspicion is needed. You have seen, too, how religion is used to justify the harshest sentences: witchcraft, heresy, blasphemy. These are crimes that require little proof and offer no defense. The accused are always outsiders: women who know too much about herbs, foreigners who pray in the wrong language, men who refuse to bow to the clergy's authority. You have pronounced these sentences, seen the condemned burned or drowned, heard the cheers of the crowd as the flames rose. You remind yourself as you watch that you are only doing your duty, that you have no choice. But the image lingers, persistent and sour. The church claims to offer comfort, and perhaps for some it does. You have seen the truly devout, men and women who seem to draw strength from their faith, who endure suffering with a kind of calm that is almost enviable. Sometimes you wish you could believe as they do, that you could see meaning in the ritual, hope in the prayers. But for you, faith is another obligation, another role to perform. You kneel when required, speak the words, make the gestures. You feel nothing. You wonder sometimes if the priests do either. It is impossible to escape the church's shadow. Its agents collect tithes from every household, keep lists of every birth, every marriage, every death. Its sermons are echoed by the city's laws. Its judgments are often final. There are no appeals, no second chances. Once, long ago, a priest stood trial for theft in your court. The evidence was overwhelming, but you were told to acquit. The next day, the man who had accused him was found dead in the river. Since then, you have learned to leave church matters to the church. There are moments, rare but real, when religion serves as a genuine comfort. At a deathbed, at the birth of a child, at the quiet times when the city's noise falls away and the candles flicker. In these moments, you glimpse what faith might mean, the peace it promises. But these moments are fleeting, lost in the daily grind of your duties. For most, religion is less about hope than about fear: fear of hell, of excommunication, of the priest's curse or the mob's anger, fear of being different, of thinking the wrong thoughts, of standing out in any way. The church knows this and uses it well. It keeps the people obedient, the order intact, the system oiled with prayers and terror. You wonder sometimes what would happen if the city lost its faith. Would chaos rule, or would the people simply find another reason to kneel, another master to fear? Would justice, as you know it, become even more brutal, or would it fade away, revealed at last for the illusion it is? You are the judge. Religion is not your shield, nor your solace. It is simply one more chain, as heavy and unbreakable as the law. Punishment is supposed to be the tool of justice, the blade that severs wrongdoing from the body of society, the fire that cauterizes wounds and deters the next offense. But after years at your bench, you know it for what it truly is: an everyday ritual, more theater than remedy, a show whose audience is as important as its actors. You have seen punishments of every kind, from the small and humiliating to the grotesquely final, and you are haunted by the knowledge that they rarely fix what is broken. If anything, they are the glue that holds misery together. You remember your first sentencing with uncomfortable clarity. The condemned was a boy, not yet a man, trembling as he awaited his fate. You announced his punishment with all the solemnity you could muster: 10 lashes, public, to be carried out before the sun reached its zenith. You watched as the crowd gathered, as the bailiff drew the whip, as the boy's screams rose and mingled with the jeers of the townspeople. That night, you barely slept. You told yourself it was necessary, that the lesson would be learned. Years later, you wonder what lesson was taught and to whom. Most punishments are smaller, but no less cruel. The stocks and pillories, lined up in the square like grotesque furniture, are rarely empty. The faces change, but the spectacle is the same: heads and hands locked in wood, bodies exposed to the weather, insults, and whatever rotten refuse the crowd can spare. You watch from your window sometimes, noting who gets pelted with fruit and who is ignored, who laughs it off and who breaks. The pillory is less about pain than about stripping away dignity. Some never recover from the shame, and you see them in the streets later, hunched and wary, as if waiting for another blow. For greater crimes, there is the whip, or branding iron, or even mutilation: fingers lost for theft, ears cut for slander, marks burned into flesh to advertise sin. You hand down these sentences as the law requires, even as your hand trembles in private. You know how permanent these punishments are, how quickly they become the sum of a person's existence. There goes the thief, the crowd whispers, long after the stolen bread has been eaten and forgotten. There walks the liar, and no one ever asks what desperate truth was hidden behind the words. When the offense is seen as a threat to the city itself, arson, murder, blasphemy, punishment becomes execution. You have already spoken of the gallows, the headsman's axe, the drowning pit. Each one has its own ritual, its own choreography of fear and finality. You are required to attend, to witness, to make the punishment not just personal, but official, sanctioned by the law, and more importantly, by you. The people gather, compelled as much by curiosity as by fear, and the act becomes a communal absolution. For a day or two, the city feels lighter, as if the weight of guilt has been shifted onto the shoulders of the condemned. But it always returns. There are always new offenses, new faces to punish. Sometimes you are required to order punishments that are almost medieval in their inventiveness: the cucking stool for a scolding woman, the ducking for suspected witches, the parade of shame for adulterers and debtors. The crowd loves these punishments best. They are participatory, a carnival of mockery and collective superiority. No one asks if the accused is guilty. The spectacle is the point. The punishment is both entertainment and a warning, a promise that anyone, given the right circumstances, could be next. And always there is the church, ready with its own brand of correction. You have watched as suspected heretics are tortured in the cellars, as women accused of witchcraft are tried by ordeal, bound and thrown in the river, expected to sink or float according to some perverse logic of innocence. The church claims these punishments are for the soul, but you see them for what they are: another tool for enforcing conformity, another way to keep the city in line. What is most striking as the years pass is how little real change follows all this suffering. The thieves come back or are replaced by others. The drinkers return to the taverns. The debtors accumulate new debts. The poor continue to hunger and steal and curse the system that chews them up and spits them out. Sometimes you catch a glimpse of someone you once sentenced, still limping, still marked, still alive. They do not look at you. If you are honest, you do not want them to. You have grown numb, perhaps, but not blind. You see how punishment shapes the city, not as a path to justice, but as a cycle of pain and spectacle. It is not healing, it is maintenance. The city is a body riddled with rot, and all the beatings and brandings in the world only cover the smell for a little while. You have started to wonder if those in power understand this and simply do not care, or if they have convinced themselves that the process itself is a kind of salvation. You wonder, too, what it means for you. Each punishment you order is a mark on your own soul, another scar that you carry in secret. You used to hope that you could balance the scales with occasional mercy, with a careful word here or a reduced sentence there. But mercy is not a currency in this world. It is a liability, a cause for suspicion. You learn to hide it, even from yourself. In your quietest moments, you question whether there is any meaning in what you do. Is justice just a mask for vengeance? Is order simply another word for fear? Would the city collapse if the punishment stopped, or would it find some other way to feed its hunger for suffering? You do not know. You doubt you ever will. You are the judge. Your power is to punish, and your punishment is to witness the endless cycle, to keep it turning with your own hands. If justice is a public act, then its price is private isolation. For all the hours you spend among the crowds, in the echoing court, in the fevered market, in the silent hush of the execution square, you are always alone. The judge's seat is set high, not just to command authority, but to set you apart. You learn to see the world from above, to look down even when you do not want to. Each day you speak to dozens, sometimes hundreds, but with every verdict and every sentence, you draw a deeper line between yourself and those you judge. You are not invited to weddings or to feasts. The city's festivals flow around you like water around a stone. At the tavern, conversation stops when you enter. Sometimes it starts up again after you leave, but with an edge of suspicion, as if your very presence has soured the ale. Children are taught to fear you. You see it in the way they freeze when your robe passes by, in the way mothers hush their cries with whispered warnings about the judge. You become a myth, a lesson in obedience, a threat wielded to make small hands let go of forbidden sweets. There are colleagues and clerks, of course, but you do not mistake their company for friendship. Their loyalty is to the office, to the hierarchy, to the system that binds you all. You have seen how quickly a friendly word can become a liability, how easily rumors are twisted, how a single misstep can lead to an investigation or a quiet dismissal or worse. Trust is a currency too costly to spend. You measure every word, weigh every glance. Even laughter, on the rare occasions it escapes, carries the bitter taste of fear. At home, the isolation is starker. The walls of your chamber hold the chill long after the fires burn out. You eat alone, sleep alone, think alone. If you are lucky, a servant leaves bread and water by your door without speaking. If not, you go hungry and wonder whether the silence outside is a kindness or a warning. Some nights you think you hear voices in the street, a stone thrown at your shutter, footsteps that pause just a little too long at your door. You tell yourself it is nothing, just the wind, but you do not truly believe it. You find you miss things you did not know you valued: idle conversation, the careless touch of a friend's hand on your shoulder, the warmth of another presence in the dark. Sometimes, late at night, you remember your family, parents, perhaps siblings, blurred now by time and distance. You have not seen them in years. Your letters go unanswered or are answered with cautious pleasantries, reminders that your position brings danger as well as dignity. You are not entirely without human contact, but what little remains is transactional. Petitioners come to plead their cases, to beg for leniency, to whisper secrets in exchange for a lighter sentence or a favorable word. You listen, you respond, you keep your distance. Every interaction is another stone in the wall around you. You become practiced at silence, at nodding without agreement, at offering nothing that could be turned against you. Even among the other judges, there is little comfort. You share the same burdens, the same sleepless nights, but the same suspicion as well. No one knows who might be watching, who might be waiting for a misstep. You exchange polite greetings, careful advice, but never confessions. You are allies in the loosest sense, each guarding your own patch of ground, each isolated within your own role. In the city's eyes, you are more symbol than person. Your face is known, your name whispered with either fear or contempt, but your true self is invisible. You could disappear tomorrow and be replaced, and the cycle would grind on, unchanged. Perhaps that is the point. The office endures, while the man inside it becomes little more than a shadow. Sometimes you wonder if the people resent you or pity you more. You see it in the faces of those you sentence, sometimes hatred, sometimes a strange kind of understanding. They know that your power is a burden, that your life is not a happy one, but they cannot afford to feel sorry for you. You are the instrument of their pain, and pain leaves a little room for sympathy. There are moments, brief, dangerous, when someone tries to bridge the gap. A prisoner who thanks you for a kind word. A widow who leaves a loaf of bread at your door, a child who smiles, forgetting for a moment who you are. Each gesture is precious, and each is quickly punished by the world. The prisoner receives harsher treatment from the guards. The widow's neighbors shun her. The child is dragged away by a frightened parent. You learn not to hope for such things. You learn to protect others by refusing their kindness. You suspect that even if you were to leave the city, to shed your robe and title, the isolation would remain. The role has reshaped you, cut you off from the warmth of ordinary life. You are marked now, set apart, and there is no returning to the easy trust and companionship you once knew. In the darkest hours, you wonder what will remain of you when your time as judge is over. Will there be anyone to remember the person beneath the title, the heart beneath the sentence? Or will you become, like so many before you, just another nameless figure in the city's long memory, spoken of only in warnings and curses? You are the judge, the city surrounds you, but you stand forever alone at its heart. By the time you have spent enough years in this office, you come to see your own fate as clearly as you have seen the fates of so many others. There is no glory in it and no escape. The city has shaped you, used you, and is already searching quietly, inevitably, for your replacement. Perhaps you thought in your first days that your name would matter, that your judgments would change the world for the better, or, at the very least, be remembered. Now you know better. Your world is not one of redemption or happy endings. No statue will be raised in your honor, no song sung in your memory. When you die, there will be no procession, no candles lit in every window. Perhaps a clerk will enter your passing in a register, using the same ink and the same tired hand he uses for every birth and every execution. The city will move on. The law will be enforced by another hand. The machine will grind on, indifferent to your absence, as it was to your suffering. And what of you in your final days? You have grown old before your time, worn down by the monotony of punishment and the sharp, secret pains of doubt. Your body aches, your sleep is thin and filled with the faces of those you have sentenced. You have few possessions, fewer friends, and even fewer confidences. The walls of your chamber, once a place of retreat, now close in like the walls of a tomb. You sense, more than ever, how little separates you from those you judged. If your door were broken down in the night, if you were dragged before a bench, you would find no one to plead for you, no neighbor to swear to your good character. You watch the city through your window, older, if not wiser. You see it cycle through the same miseries: hunger, crime, spectacle, punishment. There is no end to it. New faces appear in the dock. New clerks take up the pen. New voices echo your own pronouncements of guilt and pain. Sometimes you try to recall the names of those who came before you, the judges who once sat in your seat. You cannot. Their stories are lost, buried under layers of newer grievances. You realize with bitter clarity that soon enough your own story will join them, nameless and forgotten. Some days you are tempted to make a grand gesture, an act of mercy so obvious it cannot be ignored, or a public declaration of the system's injustice. But you know how such stories end. The city has no patience for martyrs. You have seen what becomes of those who stand alone. They are erased as if they never existed at all. The machine digests its rebels and replaces them without pause. Instead, you persist. Each day, you do your duty as it was handed down to you, as it will be handed down to your successor. You recite the law, pass sentence, sign your name in the ledger. You maintain the rituals, perform the theater, keep the illusion of order intact. You tell yourself this is necessary, that without you, the world would descend into chaos, that some justice, however flawed, is better than none. Some days you almost believe it, but you know the truth. Justice here is not a shield, but a mask, a set of tools used to hold misery in place. Your judgments are not acts of healing, but of maintenance, preserving the wounds of a city that feeds on suffering. Your only true power is to bear witness, to remember what others forget, to carry the weight until it finally breaks you. In your final season, perhaps there is a certain peace in this knowledge. You have played your part. You have not changed the world, nor redeemed it, nor even escaped its worst cruelties. But you have endured. The city will outlast you, its stone will absorb your footsteps, its dust will swallow your name. Still, for a little while, you stood at the center of its darkness, bearing the unbearable, and that, perhaps, is something. When your end comes, it will be quiet and small. Perhaps you will die in your sleep, or collapse at your bench, or simply vanish, as so many before you have. There will be no monument, no final word. Another will take your place, don the robe, recite the oaths, and continue the work. The cycle will go on as it always has. And yet, you hope, quietly, foolishly, that someone, somewhere, will remember a moment of kindness, a hesitation in your voice, a lighter sentence rendered in secret. You hope, perhaps, that the city will one day tire of its own cruelty, that a better world might be built atop these worn and broken stones. But you do not expect it. Hope is not for judges. You are the judge. This world is your sentence, and in the end, you serve it until, at last, it consumes you and moves on, hungrier than ever.